to everybody that is watching and listening. My name is Susan Shea, and I have been involved in Montessori education for a very long time. We'll say over 30 years, and we'll leave it there. I did my training in Dublin, Ireland with AMI, and I have worked in the United States for many years in both private and public Montessori programs. I am now back on this side of the Atlantic, and for the last 8 years or 9 years, perhaps, I have been living in Vienna, Austria, and am enjoying immensely the experience of working in a bilingual Montessori program. uh, any of you who are listening who work in Montessori education know that every single day that we go to our environments, we learn so much because we are continually watching the children, and there is always a story to be told. You know, when I come home from school every day and someone will say, "How was it?" Well, then they have to sit down for 10 or 15 minutes because there's always so much to relate about what children can teach us. So, I would like to chat to you this evening about one section of Montessori's vast curriculum that I began to delve deeper into in recent years, and that is the practical life section. Because over the years, I I entered into the classroom as a newly qualified teacher, and I was a little bit worried, to be honest with you, because I had to learn the names of every state in the United States. This is before I ever got to go and live there. I had to learn all the capitals of Europe where the little knobs were on the map. I had to start learning things about triangles that I had learned in high school, but not really. So there is quite a lot of factual information in a Montessori curriculum. And I will admit to you that when I entered into my first classroom, I considered this kind of little corner as well. This could occupy children, you know, while the really tricky stuff was going to be explored by some of the older children. Uh, as you can tell, I was completely wrong. And so it's great that that was my control of error. I lived for year upon year in a classroom, and slowly I began to see no, 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 no. Actually, I now get this idea of why we do this. Why are these very basic skills right at the core of every single thing we do? And now that I am a grandmother, and not only do I live among children in a classroom, but I can see my own grandchildren up close every day, I feel so spoiled. I feel so gifted that I get to watch how the beautiful part of a simple task can actually become internalized by a child and cause some magnificent things to happen. So, I would like to tell you that as I talk, I have little papers uh, over here next to me, and my entire set behind the scenes was designed by a 5 year old because she saw this pile of papers at my computer and she said, "Well, this isn't going to work very well." And I thought, "Well, what do you suggest?" She said, "I think you should go over to the side of this room, and there's a washing line, you know, with several little metal rods to hang clothes. you should take all these papers and you should take my little kit of clothespins, that I'm sure we have in our classrooms, and you should just pin these onto the rods and pull them off one at a time. Because if you take this pile of paper, Susan, and you take the one on the top, they're all going to fall on the floor and it's not going to work. And I thought, this is such a great introduction to what we're going to talk about, because problem solving is one of the great gifts that practical life activities bring. But before we go into that in detail, I would like to mention Shan has very kindly shared a website link in the chat for this evening. And the link that we have posted is referring to an article published by the World Economic Forum in January of this year. And the title of that article is "The Jobs of the Future. Skills you need to get them." The jobs of the future and the skills you need to get them. Now, we have all read by now all of these things, like most of the jobs that our children will be doing, or our grandchildren, haven't been invented yet. The world is in such a stage of massive change. So I was very curious to read this, and I forwarded the link to Shan, and she will share it with you. If you decide to read this piece, you'll be reminded that the global employment market is being reshaped because there are various factors that include environmental awareness, demographic shifts, and technological development. And so, in gathering the material used for studies that are quoted in this article, more than 1,000 of the largest employers around the whole world were interviewed. And that represents 14 million workers. And among the capabilities listed as the most desirable in the future, well, first on my list was problem solving, because I thought of this little child who had helped me organize my own speech in a way better than I could have done myself. And she did that because she was confident, because she was secure, and she has had plenty of practice with very basic things that began when she was 18 months old in her home and in her classroom. So the article concludes, because I'm going to think you might read it. It's very short, maybe a 6 or 7 minute read. But the article concludes with this very bold statement. And it says, helping workers achieve the right mix of technical and human skills will be vital as the future of work continues to evolve. So that's the World Economic Forum. Human skills. What are they? We know it's going to be technical. We know there's going to be computers and robots and everything, but what are these human skills? So today I'm going to show you a very small number of basic materials that I have in my home. As we all know, when you work in this field, we can't replicate the classroom in our homes. And I always tell parents that please don't worry. Please don't buy maps. Please don't buy golden beads. Please don't buy sandpaper letters, because then they're not special in school. This must be part of a special experience that is in your classroom community. But what you can do is you can kit out your home with all sorts of practical life materials. And Maybe you have some of these in your home or your classroom. Um, I'm just going to use them as a visual when I describe to you some of the magnificent things that practical life can bring. So this is a little dustpan and brush, possibly familiar to you. My grandson uses this and my granddaughter. And when I watch any child using this in the classroom or at home, I have to remind myself of this. It doesn't matter if all the stuff doesn't get swept. That's a really big thing for a 3 to 6 environment. Children at this age are not goal oriented, they are not product oriented, they are process oriented. So, what I need to think about as I'm watching this, before I ever give it to them to hold, I have to think consciously about how I'm using it. I want the steps that I'm doing to be very clear. I don't want to be speaking, so I distract them. I want my movements to be only the movements that are needed. I can't stop to scratch or fix my hair or anything like that. I just need to do a very beautiful movement. And the next part for a parent or a teacher is tricky. I have to step back and trust the process. So there might be a lot of dirt left on the floor for many weeks, many months, but I have to allow this child the motivation to try this by themselves. This is the gift that we give our children. Sometimes when I have conversations with parents, they're very frustrated about this. Well, I said to my kid, "What did you do today?" He said, "I swept the floor." I said, "Again? What's this kid doing? He sweeps the floor every day. What's this going to bring?" And I have I have developed a more comfortable way of explaining this because truthfully, as a 22-year-old teacher, maybe I didn't fully know myself, but I can see it over the past 30 years. So what's happening when a child is using this dustpan and brush is, first of all, they've actually decided they want to do it. They want to do this. This is education that is sparked from within, the inner drive. I mean, who wouldn't want to use it? It's so cute, very clean. I keep it clean. Um, and it's child sized. And I would like to allow this child to use it as long as they're not abusing it, as long as they are comfortable and concentrated, because concentration can only come from an activity that we love, that we are interested in. When we are encouraged, tricked, bribed, forced to sit and carry out a task that we really have no connection with, an activity that has no meaning for us, we cannot develop our concentration properly. And the connection, well, why would my child want to use this? Well, it's very simple. Your child wants to use a dustpan and brush because they see you doing things around the house, even from babyhood. They see you making a meal, washing the clothes, setting the table. This is what they know from their birth. And a human is wired as a baby to adapt. They are looking around and are feeling an urge to belong. They want to be part of this. This is my world. This is my home. This is my space. People are doing things to live as a community in this home, in this classroom later. I want to be part of it. That's why a child wants to do this. Um, I have in my home, because I don't like to replicate the traditional materials, I can make things. You know, I made this little transfer activity with peach pits. So we got to enjoy the food, and then we saw how we could dry out the seeds in the oven. And, you know, we have a little toy that's kind of cute. Again, um, why would a child be interested in that? Well, it's shiny, it's child size, it's very clean, makes a very cool noise. Our teacher lingo, we call this the point of interest. It must be appealing. But in the home, a parent can think about this too and make things. The idea is to make them beautiful. You know, I'm not using very bright colors because I want the activity to be beautiful, the things on the tray. So that doesn't mean I can't make it red, blue, green. I'm just using what I have in my home to make it beautiful. I'm just going to pull this down here. The magic of practical life activities lies within the human brain and how it is wired during early childhood. Because at this level, during the first 6 years of life, the process behind how we take in information and what opportunities we are given to explore that information are far more important than any abstract facts. Now, when I went to school, teachers used to say things like, "Do you know your numbers? Do you know your phone number, where you live?" These were things that we memorized, and they didn't damage us or destroy us, but they weren't very meaningful to us because the brain of a 3 year old, they'll enjoy repeating those words because they love you and they want to watch what you're doing and speak like you speak and perfect their language. But in terms of the relationship between those numbers, a 2 year old doesn't care about that. They just want to be part of a family. And that's why these practical life activities allow them to do this. You are giving them an invitation to aspire to something that is capable of participating. Now they are not just a baby that needs to be minded. They're part of your team, part of your tribe, part of your family, part of your community. And that's what a 2 year old or a 3 year old is really looking for. And luckily, when we give them these little tasks, it's going to give them a workout, an age appropriate workout. So we're going to exercise these little muscles in their hands, because all of these little things like a scissors or a tongs or a spoon or a jug handle, they'll need to make special little movements here. um you know, it's definitely not for this evening's talk, but we can all attest to the fact we see babies and children nowadays on phones that adults give them every day. When I am on the subway, I see adults who they just do it because they do their best. They think this is a good idea. But of course, in a classroom, We can actually see the difference, even at 3 years, when a child comes to us, between a child who has had a lot of experience carrying a bucket of water, washing their hands, scrubbing clothes, picking up stones, washing pebbles. We can see the difference between a child that has had an opportunity to use their hands and a child who has spent a lot of time only really using their hands to hold a device. It's a whole other topic, and we're going to focus on positive things because I feel there is so much to be gained by active engagement at this age. Again, the clothes that your 5-year-old will want to wash, maybe they won't be washed properly the way you'd like it, but the confidence and self esteem that they will gain from this is something that learning numbers cannot give them. We can we can develop our self esteem through experience and through accomplishment. But we cannot, at this young age, develop our self esteem through memorization. It simply it doesn't work this way. Later, if we are in high school and are competing for something academic, yes, it can play into how a person views themselves. But in the early years, the human's urge is to actually learn about themselves. Who am I? How can I fit in here? What can I do? Can I do that? Can I do a thing they're doing? Can I do it the same way? Can I help that person to set the table? Can I dress myself? Can I pick my clothes? Always tricky, but we have tricks to support parents who want to try this. Yeah. Um, Studies conducted on the development of practical skills in humans have consistently shown the following benefits. So, for one, they have a deeper understanding and improved information retention because they've used their hand and their brain together. So, when your child watches TV, you're just watching the screen, and a whole different part of the brain is being entertained. It's not concentration in the way that active concentration occurs. We're not actually giving them an opportunity to exercise that part of their brain. Well, what else can happen? Well, they can have enhanced critical thinking and problem solving. Now, I have another little work here. It's very simple. You could have it in your home, a lock and a key. A 2.5-year-old really enjoys this. It's very shiny and it's child size and it makes a very cool noise when you open the lock. And then you can take out the key. So a 3-year-old, 2-year-old is practicing their coordination. You need that when you're 12 and you're learning to play the piano or the cello, the trombone, or you're playing a sport. Coordination is a really big part of these skills. But right at the beginning, your right hand and your left hand here have to do really different things. And if they don't work, sometimes it doesn't really open. There is no adult to say you didn't do it right because all of these little tasks, they can be noticed. The child can see, well, I didn't do it right because the lock isn't open. They don't need us to tell them. And so their brain is going to say, oh, I'm going to try this again. This is perseverance. And this is also concentration. You're anchoring the child's focus. Oh, they're really, that little 5 second spell of time, when that happens for a 5 year old, it makes them feel so incredibly accomplished. It is like what would happen to me if I baked a beautiful cake, because I'm not really a good cook. But if I could bake a beautiful cake, oh, wow, I'd feel like I actually did it. This is what happens to a 3 year old when a tiny little key and a lock can actually be manipulated with success. Now, another thing that practical life activities or human skills, as the article calls it, can give a person is a growth mindset. I've been seeing this term used in a lot of self help books now for leadership skills and technological skills. What is a growth mindset? A growth mindset is the idea that intelligence can be developed. And so, what we have in the classroom as Montessori educators, we do this in presenting something in steps. We always take a concept and bring it back to the simplest step. And sometimes that's sweeping the floor. And then we make it a little bit trickier. Then we make it a little bit trickier. And then we make it a little bit trickier. It occurs in practical life, it occurs in every corner of the curriculum. Like when we start with our sandpaper numbers and end up with division, or maybe the chain of 1,000, all of these things start in a simple way. What is a growth mindset? The idea that challenge is not to be feared. Many children are afraid of making a mistake. Many 3 year olds are even afraid. I meet some every year. They're afraid to do it wrong. And if we're 3 years old and feeling that way, it's pretty hard to redirect that energy and turn it into something. But practical life activities are magic for this child, because all of a sudden the child's learning about themselves, and now they are maybe less fearful. Shyness is something. I was very shy as a child, and I'm sure I still am in many situations, but fearful is different. Fearful can really inhibit a person at every age. And so being able to recognize and build skills that are really simple actually helps to diminish the growth of fear and nervousness about making a mistake. Growth mindset, the idea that persistence brings rewards. This is like, okay, so I'm going to sweep that floor every day because I love it. I love that little dustpan. I'm just going to keep sweeping and sweeping. And by the time I'm 5.5, I will be able to organize a group of 5 children, and we'll be able to clean up the entire lunchroom, because I will know the tools we need for the job. I will know which child has the fastest track record at setting out the garbage cans and rolling up the napkins. I know who's really good at a mop. I can really tap into the complementary talents of a group of my peers at the age of 5. This is what happens when you give somebody the chance to do a very basic thing and feel good about it when they're 3. Now, improved collaboration skills. Well, I just mentioned that. This one, we have to mention it because it was mentioned by the World Economic Forum. Better career prospects. Okay, it's practical. I like to live in the moment. I work with young children. But yes, everybody needs to have the opportunity to live a meaningful life. And so, better career prospects. We want our children, as teachers or parents, it's not to be the best, to win, to do, but we do want them to feel fulfilled, both when they are 23 and can find something that is meeting their interest, but also when they are 13 and 8 and 6 and 3. Life should be meaningful to make it its most enjoyable. Um, Better career prospects due to valuable employer sought practical experience. Employers employers get to sift through, now it's all on a computer, but back in the day, they had all these pieces of paper with applications. And grades are one thing, but sometimes a person with the best grades is actually not the best people manager. So maybe the person that you or I have known in life, maybe they're in our office or we're in our college class, they might have had the best grades, but as an all rounder, they also had things that were their weaknesses, because we all have strengths and weaknesses. So when we look at group leadership, for example, team leadership, sometimes the people who actually get promoted in their employment, they're not necessarily the people with the best grades, but they have other skills that are maybe much sought after: organizational skills, tenacity, people who persist, people who have good interpersonal skills. These are huge assets. And employers in the past, present, and future always love to have people with these skills. The idea that inspiration can be found in the success of others. This is the growth mindset again. I love this one because traditional school, by its nature, it's always been competitive. Who's going to get the best mark in their essay? But in Montessori education, there is no competition, because from our perspective as educators, every single piece of material on our shelf is of equal value. So when we look at the division board or the map of Asia, that I'm still struggling to identify by name sometimes, but I have little cheat sheets that help me. When we look at these very advanced materials, we can actually say, if we are doing our work in the spirit of Montessori, they don't have any more value than this beautiful dustpan. Every work in a Montessori classroom is of equal value, and it's designed on purpose in that way. The community lives as a whole. The community consists of mixed age groupings. So no 5.5-year-old who can write beautifully and name everything can feel superior to a child who has just begun their cycle, because in a community that is collaborative and not competitive, everybody can bring something to the table. Everybody has strengths. Everybody has things to learn, including the adults, the parents, or the teachers. Humility is part of the mantle we wear in the classroom. And so when we prepare our space in a home or in a school, it's in the knowledge that every single piece of material can offer a beautiful gift to the child. Now, I made a special note as I'm reaching towards the end. Please take these words with you. Ah, yes. First of all, a concluding thought from Maria Montessori. We have to have a quote. A child who is self sufficient, who can tie his shoes, who can dress or undress himself, reflects in his joy and sense of achievement the image of human dignity, which is derived from a sense of independence. Now, I isolated the two parts that I find, I read these things hundreds of times. I mean, I'm surprised I can't even recite them, but it's really good for us to go back and read through these writings because life is very busy and very fast, and the world is not such a happy place in some corners at the moment, and it can be stressful. But I did write down joy and sense of achievement. These words popped out to me from that quote. Consider the practical life curriculum as the gateway to joy, the gateway to a sense of achievement. Because when children are imbued with a sense of joy and a strong belief in themselves, they can actually apply themselves to learning anything that appeals to their interest. And as they grow older, they will have developed the self discipline to learn anything that isn't their favorite, but now they can understand how to discipline themselves. And sometimes we all have to do things that aren't our favorite. But to overlook these basic practical activities as being irrelevant or out of date. Sometimes people will say, well, nobody sweeps their floor anymore, Susan. I've got a vacuum cleaner. It doesn't even have an electrical cord, it just goes around by itself. If we're going to think about it in that way, we're disrespecting the needs and interests of the child. They're not like us. This is a kind of a bittersweet part of our work because when a child develops and transitions into the second plane, it's like a rebirth of sorts. It's like a caterpillar becoming a butterfly, and they can't go backwards. And we can remember little parts of our lives, if we're lucky, about those first 6 years, but not a lot, because that spell of time at the beginning of our lives is so special and so unique. And it's partly because our brain accomplishes more than it actually does for the rest of our lives. It has so much adaptation to do to the world. Such adaptation to the environment and efficient functioning therein, and this is what Montessori says, is the very essence of a useful education. Useful. I would like to think that every child that we support on this journey could remember some part of what we offered to them as being useful, because we can think about our own educational journey, and there's lots I can't remember, but what we want to give a child is something useful for who they are at this time in their lives. They will never be like this again. They will never have an absorbent mind or sensitive periods. We want to give them what is actually meaningful at this special time. Now, I will I will divert for a moment and just give you a moment's overview on how I believe practical life activities can speak to every child, because as we know, not everybody is going to have access to a beautiful school like Hatfield Montessori. And we are privileged not only to be able to send children to beautiful schools like this, we are privileged to be able to work in schools like this, and we're privileged to be able to support other children who won't have this chance. Um, Dr. Montessori began her program in a way that focused on two aspects of the curriculum: the sensory activities that are also presented to children in the very young years and becoming more complicated as the child ages. But this very foundation was the practical life, because the children were allowed to live as a community. You know, they lived there for very long hours. I was very lucky to visit Rome a few years ago and see this building. And just imagine the chaos and the excitement of this wonderful pilot program opening, because children in the city at that time had nothing in this part of the city. And so a program in which children could all come and live together like a community for several hours was something truly transformational. And what we're trying to do in the Small Hands Project is to raise awareness that simple tasks, basic tasks, can actually benefit a child and prepare them for education, even if they never continue with the Montessori elementary program. They can prepare a child for traditional schooling, because they're going to help develop concentration and coordination, motor planning, collaboration, but they are also applicable for children that don't even have a stable home life. So perhaps they are displaced. Every home has even limited resources. And so a child's work, when they're adapting to the environment, is going to depend on what resources are available. And then we design the practical life activities accordingly. Some people use glass jugs. In some situations, these are not available. What can we use then? What language can we provide this information in? I do encourage you to take a look, whether you're a teacher or a parent. I do hope that you will find activities that you can use in the home. They're not meant as teaching lessons like we would present in school, but we do give you ideas on how to show them to a child. And we invite you to give us your feedback. And I'm always looking for translators and people who have good computer skills. It's a voluntary project, and I have been blessed with the work of many, many generous people who want to share their language skills. And as this project evolves, we hope to grow it in terms of outreach and also um, information. So please take a look. It's pretty new, and our goal is to grow this to provide ideas for you in your home or school, or anybody, at no cost, because we're trying to uh, bring to you something fulfilling for your life in the home that's complementary to the beautiful lives that we lead in our schools. So I'll leave it at that. I thank you, Shan. And obviously, if anyone would like to comment or have a conversation, ask a question, we have some time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Susan. That was wonderful. How did you get into the work with the refugee camps? Just curious about that.
Well, when I arrived here in Vienna, maybe 10 years ago, I can never keep count. It actually coincided with a very large influx of refugees into this city the same summer, mostly from Syria, but also from Somalia, Iraq, Iran, and excuse me, pardon me. I participated in a voluntary group called Let's Play Vienna. And on weekends, we had shopping trolleys, and we loaded up these shopping trolleys with toys, puzzles, games. And we went into centers in which many families were receiving help and housing temporarily. And we began to just play games with the children. And I liked it because, it gave me another means to see how children learned, played, whatever. We noticed that even older children were very interested in simple games and simple activities. And I also noticed that some practical life related activities were actually therapeutic because they were able to help the child relate to their home life as they had left it behind. So I think somewhere in the back of my mind I began to think about practical life and its importance, at a worldwide level. And I then began to support teenagers who were English language learners because here in Austria, in order to receive your high school diploma, you must be able to be a fluent German speaker. So many of these young people had to learn German from scratch, but they also have to pass English. So they were also learning English, and in some cases had to actually learn a third European language. And I was blown away by this because they were so motivated. Um, I hope I have given enough weight to that point when I made it. When we are motivated to do something, there is no stopping us. And so it is, I believe, even at the age of 3. And these younger teenagers really inspired me because they were determined to not only uh, integrate themselves, but to integrate into the larger family that we might call an urban community. And in many cases, the family depended on the teenagers. They became maybe they began to assume responsibilities that would be traditionally reserved for parents because they were the people who had the language acquisition the quickest, and so um, practical life at a whole other level. In Montessori education, we don't throw away the practical life activities once the children move into the elementary. The responsibilities change and become raised, I think, and um, it was very instructive to me to watch how when people were motivated to acquire practical skills, whatever they needed to be. Sometimes it would be learning how to navigate the banking system to help their family, meet their weekly uh, responsibilities, or going shopping, how to understand new foods and read the labels. Practical life really remains a skill that is critical, actually. It helps us navigate new countries, new systems. It helps us feel confident. Uh, it gives us a desire, I think, to explore just how far we can promote or advance ourselves, because self-esteem is such a wonderful thing. And I'm continually reminded of many people I know who are very book smart but just don't have the confidence to take their intellectual skill to another level. And without self-esteem or confidence, belief in ourselves, sometimes we can not meet our potential. Our potential is not just intellectual facts and figures. So I guess that's how this all came about. I love to meet new people, and I love to learn about different cultures and see that despite all of our differences, um, we are basically, people want the same thing. People really want their children to have a fulfilling life, no matter what their circumstances are. And I want to help people to do this, even if they cannot have any kind of school accessible to them at the moment. There are things everybody can do in their home. And so I like to feel that there is a community of sorts that is being established, that we do this purely in the knowledge that we all want the same basic things for our children. So this kind of program is very practical, and we hope that it's going to help many people. Our next workshop, I just spoke with a group in a camp in Iraq on the Kurdistan border last month, and we will be doing some more work with them in the coming months. And that's very exciting, I think, to know that people are looking for this. People are looking for support. I mean, I looked for support when I was a parent. Everybody wants support when we have young people to help navigate through the world. Well, how can I do this better? How can I do my best job and support these little children and help them to reach their potential?
Thank you. I see Barty Dyer says, such an inspiring session. Thank you. And I think we all feel that. And I hope that amongst some of the attendees here, you will get some more support. I've put your website in the chat, and I hope people will come and help with the translating. I can see we have quite a few languages present tonight, so maybe somebody has some free time.
Yeah,
I
I'd be
think it's
um,
not terrifying type of translating because it's actually very simple exercises. So
yeah,
I think anybody would be able to translate it easily into their home language. So
no
please help
knowledge necessary.
Susan. She really will put it to good use.
Thank
So
you.
thank you very much, Susan. I
Yeah,
see Nawal says going back to basics is always a benefit and offers the best solutions and reminds us that it doesn't have to be complicated. Thank you. Somebody else says, lovely, thanks. And Shireen says, thank you for this session. I will certainly spend time on the site. So you should have some more visitors at your website. But I hope you'll have the volunteers as well for the translating, because I think that's a wonderful project, getting all these exercises translated into other languages. Really fantastic.
thank you.
So Thank you very much. I think everyone has really enjoyed it, and I certainly have. So thank you, and wishing you lots of success with your ongoing project.
Awesome.
Thanks so much, Susan.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone. Thank you for coming. Nick, one last. Carol says, thank you. Very interesting. There we go.